southern Melbourne and West Melbourne, and unincorporated Melbourne Beach. Republican Randy Fine of Melbourne Beach and Democrat David Kearns of Palm Bay have been fighting to succeed outgoing state representative John Tobias. They have some sharp differences of opinion. Fine is a semi-retired founder of a software and consulting firm focused on the hospitality and gaming industry. Kearns is a realtor, former Brevard public school teacher, and journalist. In our studio, I drew out their positions on a handful of legislative issues that matter most to Brevard County. That's right, just the issues. First up, Democrat David Kearns. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk first about the Indian River Lagoon. There's too much fresh water in it, too much nitrogen, dead fish. What state policy changes or solutions would you support to help heal this sick estuary?
Well, definitely we need to buy the land south of Lake Okeechobee. If you're talking about the entirety of the lagoon, not just Brevard's portion, the land south of Lake Okeechobee needs to be purchased from the Everglades agricultural area in order to allow the Kissimmee River to flow in its natural direction and become one with the Everglades system. Not necessarily with ejecting the pollution from agriculture there, but we need to buy that land. The Amendment 1 money last go around was meant for that, and we haven't done that.
So this is to avoid discharges from Lake Okeechobee
into the lagoon in the south end. Right now, St. Lucie River is choke full of that blue-green algae, which is a result of the phosphate and the nitrogen. So we need to buy that land. I know my competitor doesn't believe necessarily that's the case. For our end, we need to follow this Indian River Lagoon plan that's been put forward by Virginia Barker et al., the scientists that have been working on this, Dr. Windsor, Dr. Trefry, these guys have been working on this stuff for ages. And it's now come to fruition in a plan that can work, albeit a $360 million plan, but I can tell you when I went to Stewart during the middle of the summer and toured Stewart, Stewart was a ghost town in July 4 weekend and just after. And I mean, marinas weren't moving, boats weren't moving, and you know what was really telling? No birds were there. I mean, I spent my first year in college at Jensen Beach campus of Florida Tech, and that place was teeming with life. The water was always moving with fish, and birds were everywhere. To see it like that indicates what it would be like here. And it's not just environmental ruin, it's economic ruin. I don't know, they've sustained a major blow in Martin County because of what's going on with the river. And we could sustain an equally harsh blow unless we address this situation with a bond.
What's the most appropriate way and responsible way to spend Amendment $1?
Oh, you're referring to whether to bond it or whether to allow it to come in and
it's clear that people expected that money to go towards conservation, land purchases, water resources.
Yeah.
The legislature.
Amendment 1 money, yeah. Absolutely, we do need to buy this land. And, speaking at the Big Sugar Summit that we had over the summer, talking with people like Betty Osceola, who's a member of the Native American community, we don't necessarily need to immediately discharge all that water into the Everglades system, but straightening out the Kissimmee River and purchasing that land and responsibly treating that water before it ends up in the Everglades riverine system. That's what we have to do. But we haven't done that. The money's been diverted to administrative. It's been diverted here and there, but the governor has used a trick of law, and the people in the state legislature didn't fight hard enough to make those purchases.
Let's move on to education.
Mm-hmm.
What modifications, if any, do you support for the state's standardized testing system and accountability rules for educators?
Well, first and foremost, and I've heard one of the school board candidates, Darcy Ado, talk about this, and which is great, is that the children are not politically affiliated. And we've lost, I think, a sense of children is first. Children, we have to concentrate on what's good for them. I've raised all 3 of my kids. They've gone through the Brevard school system. When there was a problem, we faced it with either the principals or the school board. We have to let teachers teach. We cannot continue to have this high-stakes testing regime that we've had. It's destroying learning. I've seen my own son come home with assignments and so forth. You have to learn how to read. They're telling you how to read. They're telling you how to answer a question about what you've read. They're giving you a rubric on how to write what you've just read. I mean, it'll suck the joy out of, completely destroys literature, reading, writing, critical thinking. That has to absolutely stop. What I've seen is, I've seen the federal mandate being used as a tool to witch hunt teachers, and that was never its design. So, you know, a lot of this falls on the policies from the Florida Department of Education, and we've got to get back to letting teachers teach. And I'm a full believer in public schools as opposed to charter entities. I believe you keep the tax dollars centered rather than spread them out into various diverse places and charter academies and so forth. And, you know, frankly, once that money disappears over the corporate wall and the charter end of it, the sunshine law goes out, the picture. So you can't penetrate in there and find out what's happening with a lot of this money. So we've seen some of the charter schools have problems financially because of you know, lack of accountability. So my thing is public education, public school, let the teachers teach, and do away with a lot of this high stakes testing. It sucks the joy out of living and teaching and being a parent as well.
In a minute, is there anything that you would change about the Florida standards or Common Core?
I think Common Core, as practiced in the state of Florida, I would do away with it. And you know, when you're talking about, particularly in mathematics, I have also seen the nightmare of these mathematical exercises that are designed to derive the same result 3 or 4 different ways. You and I came up learning mathematics in a particular way, and it absolutely works. You know, so yeah, I'm for removing a lot of these things, particularly in mathematics, because it's utterly confusing, the math assignments that they have.
Economic growth. You know, Florida has a pretty good tax climate. We've passed all kinds of
Real
lawsuit reforms. What can state government do now to help improve Florida's economy?
I think if we particularly for Brevard, if we concentrate on alternative energy, you know, we give tax breaks for certain companies and so forth. We have right now the opportunity to grab the alternative energy market. There are 380,000 jobs that are coming in wind turbine technician alone. Solar power is something that we need to focus on. There are massive amounts of jobs that are available in alternative energy, and we're not capturing that. We're not incentivizing that. Now, of course, on the far right, they will say, well, it's not our job to pick winners and losers. Fact is, we're already picking winners and losers. The governor wanted to set aside $1 billion for the economic incentive package. Yeah, and it seems to be the same companies over and over that are getting these incentives. And for instance, Walmart got a huge incentive. We had Jeff Bezos got a huge incentive. And I think, you know, sometimes, for instance, with Walmart, there was a distribution center that was more geared toward where they were going to put it, not necessarily whether or not we gave them the money. You have to remember that this money, if you have to vote on it, then you've removed it from one balance sheet, put it in another, and somebody else might have gotten an economic pop from that. So I think we have to really look at clawback. If they're not fulfilling their what they're saying they're going to bring in terms of real jobs, real human beings, then we have to be able to go after that money. And I don't see that diligence in going after that money, getting that tax money back. So I'm not let's throw away all tax incentives, but let's do it where we have a future. And I think the future is an alternative energy.
So alternative energy meaning innovation and new companies forming up around alternative energy, or alternative energy lowering costs for businesses?
Both. I think the incentives absolutely need to come to businesses for producing that alternative, going that alternative route, not just because we passed peak oil, but because it's bad for the environment to continue to rely on this fossil fuel. So if we incentivize the companies that are coming in, rather than continue down the same path that's leading us towards ruin, I think that that's also worthy of consideration. Now, of course, I'll say, Solyndra. Siemens produces. Siemens is a solvent company. They produce solar panels. They have been for 35 years. Why aren't we seeing some incentives going for these companies? And I think that the state can also do a lot. You know, every state building, every government building needs to be fitted with alternative energy. The parking lots. The VA Center has a beautiful solar panel parking lot. It seems to be working for them. Why not every state building? So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, ethics and corruption, subject that's dear to my heart here.
Absolutely.
Well, what changes, if any, do you favor to improve ethics or deter corruption in state and local government?
I really applaud what you've done, and I think that's a great step forward. I think to continue along that, we need to separate the legislator from the PAC. The PAC money that the legislators run right now makes them wholly unanswerable to the citizens. So the reason you have a representative is you send them somewhere and they represent you. What's happening is the state legislator goes there, starts a PAC, which is a giant money farm. Now, the PAC, you can take as much money as you want into your PAC, and then you spread that money around in terms of campaign money for other candidates. And it's a merry-go-round of kind of a flywheel of we would, in another day, we would call this a slush fund, and we would call what's happening political bribery. And my opponent runs a PAC, Foundation for Our Children's Future. He's run $265,000. I think once you step through that door to become a state legislator, you can't be a chairman, a registered agent, or a treasurer for a PAC. I think that's a law that will immediately make them more responsive to us. Because what we have now is it's organized corruption, it's legal corruption, and we need to stop it. So I think that's my big push for as far as corruption goes.
Mm-hmm. Democrats may want to get more organized and come back in terms of numbers and power in the House and Senate. Mm-hmm. What if Democrats say we need to have some of these PAC? What will you do?
I'm sorry. I will fight it. I think the main focus that we need to look at is whether you are representing the people of your district, and in essence, if everyone does that job, then they're representing the people of the state of Florida. So I know there's some Democrats who are probably not, down with that, but I think we need to get it's just a trick of law that enables these people to continue to operate these money farms, and we need to stop. That's the. It's really like a drug. When you're more focused on, well, let me get $30,000 from U.S. Sugar, U.S. Crystal. How hard are you going to be to getting that land in the Everglades agricultural area set aside for conservation? You're not. My opponent has taken some money from sugar. We should begin to roll the ball in the right direction as far as that's concerned, and so divorce the legislator from his PAC.
David Kearns, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so did you note his positions on the Indian River Lagoon, education, and business growth? Next up, Republican Randy Fine. Thanks for joining us in the newsroom. Let's talk first about the Indian River Lagoon. Okay, it's full of muck and nutrients and too much fresh water, and the fish are dying. What state policy changes or solutions would you support to help clean up the Indian River Lagoon?
Sure. I think there's a number of things we have to do. One of the things that amazes me about this issue, though, in general, is politics seems to be an area where you can talk about problems and never solve them and get reelected. But in the business world where I come from, if you don't solve problems, you go out of business. So over the time that I'm in the legislature, I intend to get this problem solved. I think there's a number of things we can do. The first is make sure that the legislature provides adequate resources to solve the problem. This is not a Brevard County problem. It's a multi-county problem. And much like the federal government is supposed to solve problems that cross state lines, well, this is a problem that crosses county lines, and one county can't solve it. So we have to make sure that the state does its part to solve the problem. We also have to make sure that the state stands up to the federal government. One problem that we do have is the state has allocated tens of millions of dollars to solve the problem, but then they can't spend it. It's ironic that the Environmental Protection Agency, that groups in Washington that say they want to protect the environment, are actually stopping us from deploying money that's already been approved.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the state legislature approved something like $70 million, largely for demucking, and they had all these problems getting permits. So if
Dredging
permits.
Okay.
Well, demucking seems to be where a lot of the focus is. As I understand, for example, the Brevard County plan with the half-cent sales tax, something like 2/3 of that money is intended to be allocated for demucking and dredging. So clearly, that is the general consensus of the number one thing that can work to solve the problem, is get stuff out of the lagoon. But if you allocate money and then the government won't let you do it, what good are you doing? I think we have to solve it in two ways. One is we have to stop bad things from coming in, more bad things, and then two, we have to get the bad things that are already in there out. The problem, though, is we waste a lot of time, in my opinion, focused on trying to demonize people for causing the problem. We have a problem in the Indian River Lagoon because of all of us. We all live here. People fertilize their lawns, people have septic tanks, we change the way the lagoon flows because we put in a bridge, what have you. This is the function of having a lot of people live here. But if New York could fix the Hudson River, and if Boston could fix the Boston Harbor, and if Washington could fix the Chesapeake Bay, we can solve the Indian River Lagoon problem. I firmly believe that if the Indian River Lagoon were in Miami or Jacksonville or Tampa, the problem would already be solved. But the problem is it's here in Brevard County. And so we have to make sure that the state does its part, that gives it adequate attention, and that we get the problem solved.
What do you think is the most responsible and appropriate way to use Amendment $1? It seems like the taxpayers or the voters who approved this had one idea, and then what kind of came out of the legislature was something different. What's your take?
Sure. Well, my take is that my take doesn't matter. So one thing that bothers me, it bothers me when Barack Obama does it, and it bothers me when Republicans do it, is the law is the law. And when the law is the law, you have to follow it whether you like it or not. And so the voters had one idea of what would be done with that Amendment 1 money. We have to respect their wishes. Now, my personal goal, while staying within the law, is that we use whatever resources we have to take care of what we already have. But when the Indian River Lagoon is cleaned up, when the public lands that we already own are in good shape, then if there's money left over, we can talk about buying more of it. But we have these are critical problems right now. Look, when you talk about the lagoon, if we didn't want to live on or near the lagoon, we'd live in Orlando. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we live here because we want to be near this resource. It matters to all of us, whether you boat, whether you fish, whether you swim, or whether you own a house. I mean, this has dramatic effects on property values. And this matters not just to Brevard County, it matters to the entire state. When we had the fish kill problem 6 months ago, there were people canceling their vacations to go to the Panhandle. They said, oh, the fish are dying. The fish are dying. They don't realize Florida's really big. They just hear fish kill, or they hear, green sludge, whatever it is. They don't realize we're a big state. So it doesn't matter where it happens in the state. We've got to solve the problem because the brand value on the entire state is a big deal.
Let's move on to education. What modifications, if any, do you support to the testing and accountability regime that seems to have generated some controversy here in Florida?
Sure. I think we need to focus on what we're testing. So first off, I've learned a lot about this over the past 18 months. It turns out over the time that someone's in school, there are 17 tests that they have to go through over the time that they're in school. That's not 17 tests a year. That's 17 tests over their sort of K through 12 time period. That's a little bit more than one a year. That doesn't seem like too much. The challenge is in certain parts of the state, local governments have added a whole lot more tests on top of those. And that's when you can get into 100, 200, 300 tests over that period of time. I think that accountability is okay, but I think we have to be careful about what it is that we're measuring. And my concern, it's okay to teach to the test if the test is measuring things that we want people to know. I got angry because my son wasn't being taught basic mathematics in public school. That's why I got into my race. He wasn't being taught what 9 plus 6 equaled. He wasn't told it was 15. He was told it was 4 minutes of gibberish. If we want to test kids, do you know your math? Do you know your English? Do you know how to read? Do you know basic American history? I'm okay with that. I don't think we should do too much of it. But we've had testing since I was a kid, since you were a kid. You remember you'd have to go in the cafeteria, you'd get the Scantron out, and you'd fill those things in. But what we need to do is we need to make sure we test the right things. And then we need to make sure that the test takers are accountable. It troubles me when we have to go through all of this rigmarole to do all of these tests on computers, and then they don't get the results instantly. If it's going to take them weeks and months to get the test results, why not just have the Scantrons like we had when we were kids and have everyone come and sit in the cafeteria on one day? So if we're going to try to use technology to make things better, then it needs to actually make things better. And I think there are real problems. The fundamental challenge is, and this is a challenge across the board in all aspects of government, government is not supposed to be a way to make money. It's not supposed to be a way to make money as a legislator. It's not supposed to be a way to make money as a private company. And you have a huge educational complex, who makes a lot of money off of this. And what we need to do as a legislature is keep that in check. The goal of our educational system is not to make people rich. It's to teach kids.
You mentioned Common Core.
Yep.
I think you were talking about being upset about your son's math curriculum. What changes would you make to Common Core? You think all should go, or are there portions that you keep? What do you think?
I trust the state of Florida, and frankly, I trust local school boards to figure out, and I trust parents to figure out what kids should learn. Look, anytime you centralize and you create big anything, big business is the same. Big anything inherently becomes inefficient. And I think the problem is Common Core had good intentions. Let's have national standards and let's raise those standards. But the problem is the way they were implemented has been a disaster. I had mentioned it before. My son was told that he was wrong when he answered a question, what is 9 plus 6 equals, and he answered 15. Turns out under Common Core, that's not correct. Under Common Core, you have to give 4 minutes of gibberish. You have to draw boxes, you have to fill in circles, and you have to make stick figures. And it's like playing hangman to basically answer basic mathematical questions. 9 plus 6 is 15. That's the way it always has been. That's the way it always will be. And we need to focus on what is it that we want kids to learn so that when they graduate from high school and or college, they have the skills to be productive members of society. And we've gotten off track on that, in large part because of Common Core.
Okay. Economic growth. Pretty simple question, wide open. What do you propose, or what do you think state government ought to do in order to help not just Brevard County, but the whole state become stronger, more prosperous?
Sure. Well, look, I have the benefit. I started and built 3 companies. That's what I've done in my career. I'm not a politician, not a community activist. What I did with my career is I built businesses. So I know how hard it is to do. And what I can tell you is government can't make it that much easier. It can make it a little easier. What it can do is it can make it a lot harder. And so what we need to do in this state is focus on having a tax policy and a regulatory policy that makes businesses want to come here on their own. Look, incentives are like a third rail. People get very frustrated with them. And I'm not saying there's not a place for them, but we have to make sure that if we're going to give tax dollars to large corporations, that we're holding companies accountable to do what it is that they said that they would do. And I think sometimes that's not happening. So I think that the state needs to be focused on making sure we tax and we regulate in a way that is going to maximize the desire of those companies to come here.
Florida has a pretty low tax burden overall. Are there types of taxes or ways that you would save businesses more?
I'll give you a great example. Florida is one of the few states in America that has a rent tax. So if you rent commercial lease tax, if you rent a facility for your business, you have to pay a tax on the lease. Most other places don't. Most other states, very few states do this. So if you're thinking about leasing a warehouse or a distribution facility, particularly in the north part of the state, and you could do it in North Florida, you could just go right over the border and not have to pay that tax. One of the reasons why we don't have a car plant in this state is in other states, property taxes. If you build a car plant in Alabama, they tax the property, which is oftentimes in the middle of nowhere. They tax the metal siding of the building, and that's what they tax, property taxes. In Florida, we tax the property, we tax the metal side of the building, and we also tax all of the equipment inside of the building. If you're building a car plant, where do you think all the value is? Is all the value in the property? It's all the stuff, it's the robots. So these are things that we can do. Yes, we have no state income tax for individuals, and that's a huge deal. And it's a reason why many people move here. But there are things that we can do on the business side as well to make those companies want to come here. I would rather we create a tax and regulatory incentive so all companies want to come here, as opposed to having to cherry pick them and hand out money to get them to come.
Issue near and dear to my heart, ethics and corruption. Are there any policies or changes that you would favor to help improve ethics and deter corruption as a state legislator?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we can do is we can increase transparency. So I can tell you, campaigns, for example, are very expensive. And we have a challenge in the state of Florida that the maximum contribution that can be given to a candidate is $1,000 from a corporation or a person. If someone needs to run a campaign that's going to cost $100,000 or $200,000, and frankly, some of them cost millions of dollars, there's this very difficult challenge of assembling that amount of money at $1,000 or less at a time. And so workarounds get created that become much less transparent.
These PACs.
PACs get created, bundling. The party becomes much more important because the parties can raise money differently, and that all becomes transparent. One simple thing we could do is we could say, look, you can raise an unlimited amount from an individual as long as you're showing it. And if we could do that, we would eliminate the need to have a lot of these workarounds. It's sort of like the challenge with many of these rules is it's like whack-a-mole. And you whack down the mole, and then they find another way to pop up. instead of trying to solve problems, this is what I did in my business. I created econometric systems that made people behave in the way we want them to behave. And so we need to step back and say, what sets of rules would maximize transparency? And one of them would be eliminating the need for the workarounds by saying, look, if you want to give money to a candidate, you can. It's just got to be very clear who it is and how much was given. And I think if we did that, we'd have more transparency and less hidden money in the process.
Randy Fine, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's our program. Who did you like? My thanks to Republican Randy Fine of Melbourne Beach and Democrat David Kearns of Palm Bay for sharing their positions with our viewers. I'm Matt Reed. As always, you can share your take on this program or the candidates with me online. Search for me on Facebook under Matt Reed Columnist or on Twitter at Matt Reed Writes. That's my next